Okay, so today's a nice change of pace. Normally we're working on my bike, but today I get to take a break from it and I get to sit back a little bit while we work on my dad's bike. So my dad's got a 2017 Harley Sportster 48. He loves the bike. We're really glad it's got the 1200cc motor in it because it's fantastic to ride, tons of power. However, it doesn't quite have the kind of on-road comfort he's looking for. The suspension on here, just a little stiff front and rear. So what we thought we'd do, like all things, is start chasing it with some mods. So in a previous video, we took my suspension apart, put different springs in it, both on the front and the rear. And so we figured this shouldn't be too big of a project here. So before he completely replaces the rear shocks, what we thought we'd do is he ordered a pair of progressive front springs for this bike. So this is pretty straightforward install. So you simply take out the stock springs, put the new ones in with some spacers and measure the oil. However, what's kind of interesting about his bike is looking up videos of how to change the fluid or the springs on your Harleys. A lot of the Harley forks have drain plugs on them. This model didn't. And so there's only a couple that got it this way. I can't rattle them off all up the top of my head randomly. So what we're gonna do today though is we're gonna go ahead and pull the forks off the bikes. We're gonna drain the oil out, get the springs on, measure the fluid, put it back together, and one of us has to go for a ride. It's freezing outside right now, like literally 32 degrees. So we'll see, but somebody's gonna go for a ride today and we'll test it and we'll see if this makes a good change to the bike. So stick around and let's see what it's like to get this bike taken apart. So one thing to take a note on here, before my dad started, while the fork was still in the clamp, he loosened both of the top mounts of the bolts on here so that you can break that free, because if you don't have the right equipment or way, you don't want to be holding a fork freehand and trying to loosen this. Now, one of the nice things about having multiple people here today is when we reassemble, you have to squeeze those springs down and thread without cross-threading. So as we loosen these off, we'll make sure to be careful because we don't know how much pressure we're going to expect as we pull the springs out, but we'll probably pull the springs out right now while they're on the bike before we actually take the forks all the way off. Okay, so what we thought we'd do is just do one fork at a time and take them off. And so hopefully you caught that in there. We're trying to get an idea of how much fluid's in there. Now, when you switch to the progressive springs, the forks actually take a different amount of oil than they did before. And we'll actually be measuring with this compressed all the way down. You take a measurement on each side of how deep the fork fluid is in here. So that's really easy to do. But each side, according to the instructions, is actually different. What we were doing also right there is with the fork tipped upside down is we were pumping out the old fluid. And so quite a bit of dirt and everything that had settled at the bottom came out. So what we'll do is we'll take an approximate starting point of new fluid. We'll pump that fluid in here to get all the air out. And then from there, we can actually take our measurement of what the correct fluid is, put the spring in, put it back together. In theory, it should be that simple. So we'll keep filming the steps as we go, but hopefully you guys have a pretty good idea at this point what the goal is as far as getting the old fluid out and new fluid in to go with the new springs. So then once we get the air pumped out with the fork compressed, the millimeter conversion comes out to 6.3 inches. So we'll hold this at the top and wait until that part is wet. And then we know we got enough oil. Okay, so what we got to do with the installed kind of basically PVC pipe is cut that down to 3.5 inches.
This is just to mark a straight line, then I gotta cut it.
So where I said I thought the left side was going to be the same, it's not quite on here. So if you look, you've got your thread on here, and once those threads are done, they start free spinning. So at that point, you can pull the fork down. And all we have to do on here, sorry I'm shaking, is we just got to get a wrench on that on the inside, hold that, and then twist the cap again, and that'll pull this off. And so then from here, you just follow the instructions of putting it back together, you know, and drain the fluid. So, but nope, I was wrong. Left and right are different, but this is still pretty easy to take care of. Okay, so something of note here too. After we put a wrench on that nut and loosen the top cap, you then have to unscrew that nut, because you see that keeper there? We thought we pushed the spring down, pulled the keeper out. You don't. Everything lays in there, and it was compressed by pushing down on the spring. So now what we gotta do is get the new spring in here, push down and compress it. So sorry, we're not doing the best job of getting everything filmed, but this is taking multiple hands. Since we don't have specific Harley tools, we're just kind of doing it in the garage like a lot of people do. So we'll get back when we get this thing put together a little more. Okay, so I'll put an image up of the instructions on here, but we got the supplied spacer. We've got the OEM washer clip and nut back on. And then from here, this one, let me lift it. This one's easier than the other side because this just comes up and now we tighten that back on. Easy. Well, it wasn't easy putting it together, but now it's easy. Okay, so we're back together, and yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and throw on some gear because I want to go for a ride. I want to see how it feels. But she's looking good. Back together, just pushing on it right now softly. It kind of feels a little softer on that initial part than it did before. So we'll just get everything cleaned up here. I'll throw on a jacket and gotta go for a ride. And then the kids have been here today, and they helped with nothing. Yeah, I was thinking. Hold on, give me a minute. Yeah, you gave me some chips. We'll call it good. Oh. Well, they just graded the road, so we don't have too many bumps right here. Hello. Ooh, that's cold. Okay, I don't have a lot of miles on this bike. We'll get my dad on it. But from my memories, I think this feels better. Oh, it's so cold, my windshield's fogging if I keep it down. Okay, so my dad took the Harley for a ride, and then I was waiting for him to come back and say what he thought, and then I realized we just started talking, hanging out, and I forgot to close the end of the video, so I'm home now. You know, so to close out our thoughts on there, those progressive springs for what they did to the bike, absolutely worth it. 100% worth it, 100% worth the time. You know, the biggest thing I think for us on there is on that left fork, putting that on there without, if we hadn't had the 3 people on hand to kind of compress and screw everything together, that would have kind of turned into a little bit of a problem there. I don't know how we would have honestly rigged that up. So if you're doing it on your own or anything, you're gonna want to have some tools to compress the springs or be ready to do that. You know, you need a way to compress that spring to put that thing back together. But other than that, it really wasn't that hard to do. And it's a good time to throw some new fork oil in there if you're going to take them off anyway, unless you're doing this to like a very brand new Sportster. You know, his, even after 2,000 miles, the fluid, you know, it didn't hurt to do it. So anyway, we appreciate you guys checking out the video. Hopefully it's helpful for anybody with a Sportster out there. If you're thinking of going to progressive springs, definitely do it. And again, the concept now is proven solid. Switching to progressive in the front worked, and so now we're going to lean towards doing progressives in the rear, but those are about twice as much money because again, you're replacing the whole assembly. But at this point, I think it's definitely on his list, and then once he gets the comfort figured out, then we can move on to some fun stuff like the exhaust, chips, stuff like that, the good stuff. So, all right, thanks for checking out the video, and be sure to keep on riding.